with all good intention, registries typically receive data, but then they don't provide insights back. When you give data up to a registry that aggregates the data and does averages, you get averages across all these different local environments and different patient populations, and averages aren't what we need. What we need is feedback for our own patients, our local environments.
You're listening to Data Nerds in the OR, a surgeon's journey toward value-based care. The podcast focused on data and data science as the keys to a better healthcare system. Ideas brought to life by the vision and experience of host Dr. Bruce Ramshaw. Each week, Dr. Ramshaw sits down with different players in the healthcare system to discuss how data is used today and what it could do if it were used effectively, how it could improve surgical quality, education, outcomes, and drive better patient care. Let's dive into the latest episode. Here's your host, Dr. Bruce Ramshaw.
So I'm with Dr. Tripp Buckley for this podcast. Thank you very much. Tyke and I are really excited to talk with you. Tripp has been a friend and colleague for many, many years, and we've had lots of discussions about data and healthcare. And Tripp has many hats. You'll hear about him throughout this podcast. But yeah, Tripp is at Dell Medical School at UT Austin. He helps run, or he founded and runs the foregut program there. I want him to introduce himself, give more of his background. So Tripp, thank you very much for joining us today.
Sure. My great pleasure. And as you said, we've been friends for a long time. I do exclusively foregut surgery now. But really my journey kind of to where we are today began way back even before I was a medical student and doing research with a gastroenterologist named Gene Overholt. And he was a private guy, but for those who are history nerds, this is data nerds, but history nerds, he invented the flexible sigmoidoscope. He also pioneered photodynamic therapy for unresectable esophageal cancer. That's where I was working with him. And then also founded the first ASC, JCO certified ASC in the country. And all out of Knoxville, Tennessee, and all in private practice. He's the only private practice person I know, and I'm sure there's others, that has 2 articles in New England Journal of Medicine. And he, to me, epitomized what a physician should be, but also not just doing good work for good work's sake, but also analyzing the work that you're doing, and also excellence in surgery. And gastroenterology. But he, one time we were doing a case, and this is long before I even thought I would do esophageal work. And he said, okay, send this person, talk to his nurse, send this person to Vanderbilt for a Nissen fundoplication. And I asked him, I'm like, I don't know what a Nissen is, but why go to Nashville from Knoxville? And he's like, this person is the only surgeon that I trust to do those cases. And I kind of always wanted to be that person. But I think more importantly, it really drove home to me that, I mean, we need to be able to have a more democratization of certain procedures. And the only way we can do that is by understanding our own data and really learning from it, and then trying to see what insights, if you will, we can gain from that data, and, constantly trying to get better. And so, as the years have gone by, I've worked on collaborating with gastroenterology. And so, at UT, we were able to create a digestive health program, an truly integrated program with gastroenterologists. And throughout the entire digestive tract, we all are in the same clinic and share the same resources. So it's really cohabitation of 2 specialties that don't always mix super well together. And so from foregut, we've got foregut folks on the GI side, and then midgut and colorectal. And so we pair those dyads throughout the digestive tract, and it's been really exciting and challenging and all those things. So I'm excited about it. And so I have a dyad who leads the gastroenterology side, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's so important. When I was starting to learn some of these principles at University of Missouri, I was chief of the Division of General Surgery, and I saw the need to build resources around the patient problem, as you're doing and as you've done. And I could not get the support from gastroenterology or the dean to do that because everybody was siloed and they were always turf battles and competition. And it was just so frustrating. So congratulations. I think that's the right way to do it. It's to do it around the patient and all work together for the good of it shouldn't matter whether it's surgery or medicine or whatever's best for the patient. I think we should be doing. And I think it in our heart, we know that, but in our business model that's failing in healthcare, it's, it's all fragmented and siloed and that has to go away. So congratulations on that.
It's true that I'll just make a quick comment that, we talk about patient centered care all the time, and yet our institutions, and sometimes the specialists, but I think it's more institutional, really put us in silos, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah. And I think it's going to change and we're going to hopefully help lead that change. Let me go back then to from a data perspective and some of the fragmentation and silos. What's your experience historically in the use of data in healthcare and patient care? And I think I know your answer, but I think data is a mess in healthcare. But I want to get your perspective on the traditionally how we've been doing data in healthcare.
Obviously, not very well. I mean, the way I look at it, I guess, is like, the first amount of data that you start to get is maybe as a resident, at least in surgery and through M&M. And we talk about our failures and our challenges and how we can get better. But, you just chalk that in the back of your brain. It's not anywhere. And then maybe you start to build a Excel spreadsheet and put your own patients in there. Well, it turns out that's a lot of work. I mean, we did it for a variety of reasons. For me, starting probably about 10 years ago, more for patient tracking, but we started to put some other data stuff in there so we could really tease it out. That's crazy primitive.
Mhm.
We've got when I first became board certified, I used the American College of Surgeons registries and things like that. That's neat, but that's that's just pure data. There's no analysis there. There's no other contextualizing factors that really help you, I don't think. I mean, we're competitive and they know that. So we like to see how we're doing against everybody else in the country. Uh, we've got, things in the hospitals, maybe they have NISQIP or something else. And that's also really primitive when you think about it. It's not that it's bad. It's just that, it's very select. Well, first of all, it's a select number of hospitals because it's super expensive. Then it's a select number of patients because they can't, to do that analysis takes human beings. And so you got to pay all these nurse coordinators to extract data. And then it's only aliquots. It's not the whole picture. So we don't have it. And it's really frustrating.
Yeah. Well, that's what got me so focused on this is as I got in leadership and began to look at the problems with healthcare. First, I saw the need to build resources around the patient, but then eventually I saw we are not using data appropriately in healthcare. It's all fragmented. It's poor quality. And it took us years of working with a team of data scientists to realize this, but the science is all about measurement and improvement, right? If you can measure something, use data tools appropriately, you can improve it. And we realized we need to start learning how to measure value and put the financial data with the outcomes data in the context of each whole definable patient process. And I guess that leads to maybe talking about Dell Medical School and the vision around Dell and how that happened. And the good is the people and the vision. I think are right in line with everything I've learned. The challenge though is it hasn't reach the potential that I think we need it to reach and we need to do all together to truly transform healthcare. So maybe talk about that history and your part in that and your view of how that's going.
Yeah. I'll go back just a sec. One of my biggest pet peeves is, we don't have a lot of our own data and folks don't, people that should don't get their own data. So what, the other form of data that we have, and I know this, I think is a pet peeve of yours too, is quote unquote research, right? And so if Memorial Sloan Kettering or MD Anderson says, oh, we did 1,000, pancreatectomies and our leak rate is X%, that's what gets quoted to the patient. That it likely has nothing to do with your leak rate. And so telling patients, national data about big operations drives me berserk, unless it's your own data. And and we've got a lot of that going on, and this is where we all, again, myself included, need to get better by having our own data and say, hey, this is my leak rate, this is my recurrence rate, this is, is it in line, is it not in line? I don't know. Make changes quickly and be able to pivot quickly. Dell Medical School. So Dell Medical School is an interesting school, very young. I think I may be wrong on this, but I think 7, 8 years old. And it was the first school in something like 50 or more years that was built on in a research institution. So lots of, many schools around in Texas. We've got a ton, but but they're all like, say, UT Southwestern or UT Houston. They're all their own entities. They're not on a university campus. And so it allowed us a great opportunity to really collaborate with, one of the premier research institutions. And they, a lot of the leaders that started the school, my chairman included, are value-based care folks. So to us, value-based care is value equals the outcomes that matter to patients, not just outcomes, but those that matter to patients over the cost of an episode of care. It sounds great, to your point. And then it starts to break down when you have, you start to struggle with, figuring out what outcomes do matter to patients. Well, especially on the orthopedic side, at our institution, there's a lot of work done around that. And, small groups, pre-surgery, post-surgery, things of that nature. Turns out that's really expensive. So that kind of ended, fairly quickly. But they really learned a lot in understanding what some patient-reported outcomes are in any given person's specialty. I mean, those are out there usually and available. But then it's really time-consuming to get that data. We do it, but it's tough, and not every clinic and we call them integrated practice units, are resourced to be able to do that. And then you get to the really hard part is if that's not hard enough, then it's trying to figure out the cost of an episode of care. Our institution does not own its own hospital, and fairly quickly, no one was really interested in sharing financial data. So while we hold ourselves out there, and we even have an institute for value in care, and we can get to that at the end, and because I have a good book for you, but it's a real struggle to get that financial data in there, and getting institutions to buy into the idea that, this is not, doesn't have to be super secret data that you're giving us. We even just a little bit of data, we can do big things with it. We can help you save money. Perhaps that's not the goal of value-based care, I would argue. We might argue that the amount of money that we spend in the United States on healthcare is appropriate for, the wealthiest nation on the planet. Probably not, but somebody might argue that, but at least we want to get value out of it, right? And we for sure are getting the maximum value that we can out of the healthcare dollars spent, and and especially from the patient's perspective. So a lot of work to be done. We're scratching the surface. Just recently, it was announced that UT is building their own hospital. For many reasons, but one of them is out of this frustration of we can't do value-based care currently because we don't have a good partner to do it. So we're trying to solve really hard, and we've done a lot of good work on solving the top part of the equation. We don't have the denominator there yet, but hopefully real soon.
And I think you bring up some of the barriers, but also, the focus on value-based outcomes. A byproduct of that should be the costs will go down. Hospitals can improve their financial outcomes. And I think, to your point, I've had the same struggles trying to do this as a surgeon in a leadership position. The hospitals weren't ready. They didn't want to share the financial data. But I think as we demonstrate that the biggest financial winner is going to be the facility, when you do data appropriately, and it's not a bad thing. to put financial data with outcomes data so we can all have a sustainable healthcare system globally, then I think we'll see that change happen pretty soon. It may be led by a group that has their own hospital, like you're about to do.
No, I mean, you have some data that maybe you talk about in another podcast that is just so amazing. It's just mind bending that hospitals don't want people like you or me to be doing this work. Um, and sometimes it's almost like a bad word to try to save money. But that's the love language of hospitals. And I don't hold them accountable for caring for patients. Institutions aren't, we took an oath to care for patients. That's my job. We'll do the care side and make it better for the patients. But at a bare minimum, at least do your hold yourself to your own fiduciary responsibilities and try to work on the bottom line. Let us help you. I mean,
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Let's work together, because when you do it separately, like we continue to do it in healthcare, it doesn't work. When you're only looking at financial, you end up doing cost reduction. And then when you're only looking at patient outcomes, you're flying blind as to what's the best value. And we have to learn how to put that together. And, again, it took me years to figure that out, working with a lot of smarter people than me, data scientists and engineers. But once we learned that, there was a lot of clarity in that. I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, if we can measure value and work together, we can improve it. And so that's what we're working towards. Just briefly, I want to give a little bit of context and history. A lot of this came out of Harvard Business School. Early around when I was trying to learn how to do this, when I was at Missouri, I started reading some of the articles coming out of Harvard, and really was a good foundation. Now, some of the articles and some of the descriptions were a little bit overwhelming, like the shift to activity-based accounting from cost accounting, and the need to do every single little penny that was uh, costed throughout the activity. We learned you don't have to do that. You want to really just focus on what matters the most and get rid of the noise. You don't have to get all the data. You need the data that really matters. So that was a big learning we went through as we tried to apply some of those Harvard business principles. And a lot of the good people that started that are now in Austin, Texas, working with you.
There you go. That's a tip for later.
Yeah. Maybe let's shift to your practice and your foregut program and talk about, what's the value of getting data there. And I know we worked a little together in this value model, and we built some of your data into our interactive data visualization tool, where you can begin to see, if a patient comes in with these factors, what's the impact on outcomes. Maybe you can talk about some of the value of what, and I know we haven't done it a lot lately, but some of the work we did together a few years ago, and how that impacted your thinking about value for your foregut program.
Yeah. So, kind of going back to the idea of having your own data. So we kept a lot of data in Excel spreadsheet, and then RedCap, as a lot of people do. And we were looking at a lot of things, patient reported outcomes, some other objective measures as well. And you can run that data as if you're doing a retrospective review for recurrence rate or dysphagia. But really in getting to know you, that's so simple when you have you can do so much more with that data. And then also, we were lucky enough to have you come down, meet with our people. We're talking about outcomes that matter to patients. Well, frankly, it never occurred to me to get the entire team all the way down from the MAs, your medical assistants, to the nursing staff, to everybody. Like, what do you guys think matters? And there's a lot of ideas. And then, you start to figure out, well, maybe I, as the physician, don't have all the answers here. And then I think where you and the work that you've done really crystallizes a lot of this is in getting a useful data visualization tool that starts to take into lots of factors, or parsing out and narrowing down factors. So, when we have, a bunch of patients in a database, you can start to say, hey, for you, you have these characteristics. This is your likely outcome based on my experience. Yeah. But that's where the beauty starts. And we used that tool and also our own data, like very quickly pivot to and away from certain meshes, for example, or techniques of fundoplication. And but it's only by looking at that that I continue to learn at the rate I want to learn. I'm, even though we said I'm out 20 years, I'm still excited to learn and get better. And I think that that's part and parcel of being a physician. And I think most physicians want that. And we just don't have the tools. Well, we may have the tools, but we don't have the ease of use to do that and execute on that on a daily basis across academics, private practice, large multi-specialty groups. So that's where you, Bruce, and Care Syntax and people like Taki are going to come in and help us out.
Yeah, and that was very kind of you to allow us to come down there. We had spent over a decade learning to do this, but only in our own complex hernia program. I think you may have been the first other clinical site that we actually traveled to, and it was before the pandemic. And your team was great. You were receptive, and like you said, some of the aha moments, that you have when you bring the whole team together and the perspectives. I remember something about, I might get the exact thing wrong, but as we were going through the discovery and building the whiteboard, what factors are most important, what outcomes measure value. I remember you and the PA, I think, were saying, well, yeah, we do this liver shrinking diet that we think is really important. So we give it to every patient, and your MA and your frontline staff were like, no, we don't. We only give it to these patients. Like, oh, you didn't know that. So things like that. When you get everybody, you get the team, and you don't have to do it every day for 5 hours, but just every few months, just checking in and getting everybody's perspective and learning from each other, and then applying that knowledge and then getting insights through the data and the interaction with the data. That's the continuous improvement method that we're trying to scale across healthcare.
Question from the audience, if you will. We're talking about your visit down to UT Dell and the work that you did with Dr. Buckley's group. The audience is asking, how did that happen? You said maybe they were the first you worked with. Was it because UT Dell was so focused on this in the first place, or was this before Dr. Buckley even had that backdrop of a value-based care initiative around? Like, how did you go about connecting?
Yeah, so I think it started with the relationship for sure, and Tripp spent probably too much time that he wanted to spend in my office when I was chair of surgery at University of Tennessee, and he was coming by and interested in a possible position, and I started showing him all the data we were collecting, and it started there. But and then he ended up at UT Austin and the value-based care stuff. I just really wanted to work with him in that environment. And then we did get some funding, a little bit of funding from one of the industry partners to fund that. So Tripp, maybe you can talk about your perspective of how that happened.
Yeah, that's pretty right. But it's one of my favorite stories. Is I grew up in Knoxville, and Bruce was there, and I kind of just got in touch with him and said, "Can I come by?" I was thinking maybe of a move, and I think we had like 15 minutes to talk, but then it turned into, I don't even know how long I was in there, but because Bruce had all these papers all over the place. I mean, like dot matrix printouts, like 3 miles long. And I'm like, what's going on here? And anyway, we started talking, and then that the conversation just took off from there, and it was fun.
You got to see what a data nerd looks like with their
Sure did.
data. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about the American Foregut Society. It's something that you've been a part of since it was created. You're a co-founder, and now we're starting to talk about how do we take these data science principles and implement them at the society level. How do you see the CQI concepts, the data science principles, could be beneficial for members of a society like the AFS?
Yeah. So again, especially in foregut, there's a lot of witchcraft there, is what I say. We don't have a lot of really good prospective randomized trials. in a lot of the things that we do. So it's a lot of witchcraft, and that's okay. I mean, some people, especially like Bruce, say, hey, we don't need a prospective randomized trial for every single thing that we do. But what we do need is good data and a good understanding, and to be able to, again, pivot quickly. So the American Foregut Society is a society of surgeons and gastroenterologists that are hyper focused on the foregut, um, which is great. A great collaboration again, and has been really successful. We would like to set up, much in the way of America's Hernia Society or the ACS, a repository, and the membership wants a repository to track their outcomes. And again, that could be very primitive, or we can do it, in my view, correctly and do it via a robust CQI methodology that will be really way more valuable to the individual gastroenterologist or surgeon, and especially to the patients. And of course, again, our membership is all over the place: academics, big multi-specialty groups, and private practice. And so, something that we're going to be offering it for free to all the membership, and working with you all on making that hope really robust and meaningful to both the individual and also the patients that we serve.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's very rewarding to see organizations like FS. And I think we're getting more and more interest from other societies because, with all good intention, registries typically receive data, but then they don't provide insights back. When you give data up to a registry that aggregates the data and does averages, you get averages across all these different local environments and different patient populations, and averages aren't what we need. What we need is feedback for our own patients, our local environment. You highlighted that earlier in this. And, I've heard surgeons who, regularly participate in registries, and they give their data up and they get nothing really back that helps them for their patients. So, working together to do that. And that's a basic data science principle: is the data requires context, but it also requires decentralization in each local environment to really, and that's where you want to do the initial analysis. You can pull the data to look at bigger numbers and lower signals, and you can network algorithms that come out of that to get higher predictability. But if you don't start decentralized in context, you lose all ability to gain those kinds of insights that we're talking about.
Yeah. And I think being able to do that will be, again, we think of ourselves as a rather unique society, and that will continue that uniqueness trend. It gets more distributed across societies and bigger organizations.
I do have a follow-up question here. I'd love to jump in here really quickly. Dr. Buckley, you talked about UT Dell and what you're doing, and essentially you found that you have a problem extracting outcomes information, financial information, because you didn't own the hospital. So what's your solution? You're going to build a hospital. Okay, so vertically integrating, right? This is business 101. Have you thought about, or is there a consideration on the insurer payer side as well? Because that's the true financial pay. That's in the value equation, right? What the benefit to the patient over cost of that procedure. The true cost is borne by the insurer, the payer. What is UT Dell's thoughts about that?
Well, I think, a lot of places and departments and even individuals, myself included. I mean, I've gone to Blue Cross Blue Shield and said, hey, I do more of these in the state of Texas. I mean, it would seem to me, if you guys are paying out the dollars, that you might somehow create a narrow network or something. And I will tell you that our chairman of surgery, Kevin Bozick, is, well known as a value-based leader in value-based care. And even though their outcomes, and they've shown the cost of the procedures that they do, and their whole, system, I shouldn't say the procedure cost is the procedure cost, but the way that they go about treating the patients, and through an integrated practice unit with, physical therapy and all nutrition, everything integrated into one place, the cost is way low. And he has been turned down by insurance company after insurance company. They're like, this sounds too big. We'd love to save money, but this is just too much for us. I don't get it. I've got no insight, if you will, into why they do not seem to care about. They'll let anybody do a NIS and they'll let anybody do a knee replacement. It makes I'm miffed, befuddled. I don't get it, and I think that maybe when the numbers get so big through an entire institution, that will help. I know that Baylor Scott and White, for example, they've got, my understanding is they've got really good contract because the system overall seems to deliver care at a lower cost. Makes sense because they're wildly vertically integrated, including with their own insurance product. But I don't, yes, I mean, you would think that the insurers would be clamoring for us to do this. And it seems like United has a research group and they actually came to a bunch of surgeons at one point in time talking about LPR, because it turns out laryngopharyngeal reflux disease costs them like 3 times as much money as traditional GERD. They're like, why is this? Well, it's because patients are bouncing around the system, and they asked a group of us to help out. C. Dan Smith was one of them. Bruce. But anyway, I don't get it. I don't understand. I don't.
Yeah, I think that
making so much money, they just don't care.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Anyway, I think it's a lot of cognitive dissonance in healthcare. People in leadership positions and doing things, they don't want to have a bad system or a bad company or a bad business plan. They want to see patients do well, but it's just so attractive to just charge more every year, provide less benefits. And that's, essentially, maybe not intentionally, but that's what has happened. But we have had meetings with insurance companies that are starting to change that thinking. They're starting to think that business model is not sustainable. Large employers are moving out of private insurance and doing their own insurance. And now we're starting to hear a little bit of insurance companies say, hey, let's partner together and go into the clinical environment together, and let's help improve value-based outcomes. And with the method that we developed, that is something that is doable, predictable. If you measure it and use data tools appropriately, you can improve it. So I think we're just beginning to have a good timing. It's still early, especially from a private insurer perspective, but we are having dialogues with private insurers that are talking that language now, which is refreshing, because hadn't heard that. Like you struggled and Kevin has struggled, but maybe we're seeing the beginning of that change. And hopefully the more we can demonstrate it, the faster the change will happen. So that's one of my last questions is, we all know we have to go through this change. Maybe Tripp, talk about what you think is the future of value-based care. How is this transition going to happen? What kind of time frame do you think it's going to happen in? You see any kind of thoughts about the future for value-based care?
Yeah, well, I think, since care is right in the word, and we're talking about how insurers, they're not obligated to care. Hospitals are not obligated to care. We are obligated to care. And so I think it's going to start with us, and then hopefully with companies like Care Syntax being able to finally show some value, get some, start chipping away at the financial piece, and then really showing that this can have value for both patients and institutions and insurers, that will start to build some momentum and get the holy grail.
How long is it going to take?
15 years to take hold and really, really be going. I think the first 5 years are going to be the most exciting. And then maybe between 5 and 10, people start, maybe I'll shorten that. Then 5 and 10, like it's either you're on this train or you're not on this train. And the people that are on the train, the patients are happier. Patients go to places where they're going to be happier. Patients are very sophisticated these days. Probably at least a third of my practice is from, over 4 hours away, from almost every state. Patients know where they're going to get good care. They know places that want to provide good care. Kevin Bozick tells a story about someone who's like shopping around and for knee surgery or hip replacement, and they when there was an institution, I can't remember what it was like, we're terrible, and this is all, and they published all this stuff. We're terrible at these things, and but we're getting better. And this patient who was like a CEO of some company was like, I'm going there because they care about getting better.
Yeah.
And so I think that patients are sophisticated. Patients, institutions and health insurers need patients to make money. And I think, you'll either be on that train or you'll be off that train. And I think that's my view. And so maybe it's 15 years, maybe it's 10 years. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's getting faster and faster. And, a lot of things are coming together. The LLM and Gen AI technologies, that's going to help facilitate data management, data cleaning so much better than the manual and challenging rules that we have to build in the current software. And for me, it's really refreshing because when I started to talk about this over a decade ago, the common answer was, oh, this is not going to happen in our lifetime. It's going to take generations. And I think we're seeing, no, it's going to happen. And it's going to be not tomorrow, not next year, but it's going to be a reasonable amount of time because all of this is coming together, both good and bad. We're seeing bad. I think the pandemic opened a lot of people's eyes in healthcare that we treated the pandemic the same way we did 400 years ago with bubonic plague because we had the same science and we didn't have a data and analytics infrastructure in place where we could have identified who gets this and has problems, who gets that and doesn't have problems, and what treatment is better for what subpopulation. So yeah, that's refreshing. 10 to 15 years, I'll take that.
Well, and healthcare tech, I mean, we didn't have, companies like Care Syntax, right? And data integration and cleaning and using AI and all those things. I mean, it'll be hopefully a paradigm shift for all of us to be able to have access to that data, and really be able to learn from it. And we just haven't had it. So,
well, that it's encouraging, and I'll ask a final question to end on a high note. What kinds of books or movies or resources have you had experience with that is encouraging about this, that is hopeful for our global healthcare system?
Well, I'll just throw out a movie, and that's Trading Places, which has nothing to do with healthcare or this, but you should watch Trading Places because it's my favorite movie. Now, from a books perspective, so going back to Dell Med, so you're right. Dr. Teisberg and Scott Wallace founded the Value Institute for Health and Care, and also I think Dr. Porter was at Harvard, and but Dr. Teisberg Porter wrote a book called Redefining Healthcare: Creating Value-Based Competition on Results, and that is a great starter for someone trying to get into value-based care. Dr. Bozic, I know, also has a book for the orthopedic surgeons, value-based healthcare in orthopedics, I think is what it is. But really, the Porter and Teisberg book is a great place to start, and start to kind of dig in. And there's lots of good examples of places that do little bits of this in aliquots. Again, no one's doing it amazingly well across large institutions, but that's the goal.
Yeah, that's great. That was definitely one of the books I read early in my evolution to understand these concepts.
I would be remiss if I did not ask a question about the third or fourth, whatever leg of the stool that we didn't talk about. And Dr. Buckley, we talked about the surgeons like yourself and the societies trying to hopefully adopt value-based care. We've talked about the insurers, the payers, and of course the points of care, the hospitals, ASCs. What are your thoughts, or have you seen any change in activity from industry, meaning pharma, med tech, any of those, making the tools or the things you are using on a day-to-day basis toward a value-based system?
I can't say that I have. You may have examples, and I can comment on that. I can't say that I have. I mean, I just haven't. you take, we have a new potassium inhibitors. It's a third generation PPI. Basically, it's not a PPI. It's a completely different drug. But the way that they're rolling that out is exactly the way every other companies rolled out their drug. Tech companies, mesh companies, it's all the same. I haven't seen it. Now, what I have seen is, companies, wanting to accrue data and wanting that, metadata, and that's where um, societies can come into play. And for sure, that data is valuable to them because it's real world data. And so I think maybe this will change and help drive some different innovations and the way they go about business and really vetting products rather than getting surgeon champions to go out there and give a podium presentation and a dinner talk and all these other things that we're going to accrue data quickly and really be able to act on it. I haven't seen any big seismic changes currently, though. Maybe some examples.
Yeah, I think we can do that. We've done that a little bit. There's been some companies that are truly interested in understanding the value of their product, and they're okay with understanding where there's not value, but it's not the norm. Like you said, Tripp, the norm is volume sales and commissions based on volume sales. And so you're incentivized to just sell, sell, sell. But, hopeful thing is with societies like American Foregut Society, if we get this data and analytics infrastructure, like you said, we can create value innovation networks. And then, companies can plug their product in and we can help define where is their value, where is there not value, because ultimately that's going to be a better long-term financial outcome for the company than when it's used in areas where complications happen. I mean, you mentioned hernia mesh. There's huge product liability lawsuits around hernia mesh. And, if we could show companies where their products don't have value, where they may contribute to complications, and also where they do have value, they can sell and market into that. And that'll be a much more sustainable and long-term financial method than just sell, sell, sell. So hopefully we can help facilitate that change.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So full disclosure, I sit on the medical advisory board for Fathom Pharmaceuticals that have come out with the first FDA approved potassium competitive inhibitor. And it's like, a PPI. Well, it's stronger than a PPI. It's easier to take and more effective. Well, the where they rolled this out initially is like for H. pylori, and then of course it's going to be really expensive. And they got an indication on a smallish study for erosive esophagitis, and it's like the same thing. But I will say that they are interested, and they've come to the AFS and said, okay, well, how can we look at this differently? Because obviously they want to take over the world, and it's in a pretty amazing drug, but they want to decrease their cost to market. Is the reality, right? We've got a good product. How do we get, to get it through the FDA and all these other things and get an indication, millions and millions of dollars, so, hey, if they're only look at it from the way of getting it, decreasing their cost of market, and we get great data and really understand where it can be used effectively versus, Tums or Rolaids, that's great. Everybody wins.
Yep. That's the future. Well, Tripp, I really appreciate your time and your friendship. I think this was a really fascinating discussion, and especially with the experience you had there at Dell Medical School, UT Austin. And I hope we're going to do, as much as we've been able to dip our toe in the water with CQI and value-based data science. I think in the next few years, we can do a whole lot of stuff together and help be at least some of the people that help lead the transformation of healthcare. So thank you very much for your time.
My great pleasure. And I'm ready to get soaked. Dipping the toes has been fun, but let's get soaked.
That was great. Thanks for your time, man.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Data Nerds in the OR, a surgeon's journey toward value-based care. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned in today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you want more content like this, you can always sign up for our Smart Surgery blog via the link in the show notes. Or if you want to ask Dr. Ramshaw or the team a question directly, please send an email to podcast@caresyntax.com. This episode is brought to you by Care Syntax, the leading vendor-neutral surgical intelligence platform. The Care Syntax platform can ingest and analyze data throughout the surgical workflow, including clinical, operational, financial, and outcomes data to capture a complete picture of the surgical pathway. That data can produce actionable insights to enhance efficiency and innovation for surgical teams, hospital administrators, and medtech developers, driving innovation for the future of healthcare delivery. Care Syntax impacts over 3,000 ORs and more than 3 million annual procedures across the globe. Learn more at www.caresyntax.com.